All right, welcome to another deep dive where we basically take a whole bunch of information and boil it down to the essentials for you.
Just the good stuff.
Yeah, just the stuff that you need to know.
Yeah.
And today we're looking at Ori Hofmekler's The Warrior Diet.
We got some excerpts from his book laying out all the core ideas and principles of this pretty unique way of eating.
Yeah, so basically what we're going to try and do today is figure out, what are the main ideas behind the Warrior Diet? What are the supposed benefits? And what should you really be thinking about if you're thinking about trying this out for yourself?
You keep it good.
So let's get into it. The Warrior Diet, kind of a catchy name. What's the central idea here?
Well, the core idea is basically to kind of mirror the eating patterns of, ancient warriors.
Okay.
So what that means is under-eating during the day and then overeating at night.
So, Ori Hofmekler, he's the guy behind this. This isn't just some random theory that he came up with. He's got kind of a interesting background himself.
Yeah, definitely. He was a member of the Israeli Special Forces, and he spent a lot of time studying the diets and lifestyles of, warriors throughout history.
So it's almost this idea of tapping into something primal, like our instinctual way of eating that maybe we've kind of lost touch with in our modern 3 square meals a day plus snacks world.
Yeah, exactly. And so the way he breaks it down is there's this under-eating phase, which happens during the day, and then the overeating phase, which happens in the evening.
Okay, and so just to be clear right off the bat, we're not just talking about what foods you're eating, but really when you're eating them.
Right. That's a huge part of it. The timing is really key.
Okay, so let's break it down then. That first phase, the under-eating or the day phase, what's that actually look like?
So during the day, you're basically consuming very little.
Okay.
The focus is on really light, easily digestible foods, mostly raw fruits and vegetables and fresh juices, kind of keep things moving.
Yeah, just enough to kind of keep the engine idling.
Yeah. And I did notice that small amounts of dairy are allowed, specifically raw honey or brown rice syrup, can be used with protein powder.
Oh, okay.
So, even within the under-eating phase, there's still this focus on, minimally processed whole foods.
Okay, now what are the benefits of this under-eating period? Why would you want to put your body through that for, a good chunk of the day?
Well, the idea is that during this phase, you're really encouraging fat burning.
Okay.
Your body starts to rely on its stored energy reserves, and it's also supposed to increase energy levels and improve physical performance, which sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, you would think you'd be dragging if you're not eating much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the idea is that your body becomes more efficient at utilizing the energy that it has available.
So almost like switching your body into a more, catabolic state during the day when it's breaking down stored energy and then getting ready for that anabolic, building and repairing process later on. And I think a question a lot of people might have is, am I going to be starving all day? What does the diet say about dealing with hunger?
Well, it's not about, complete deprivation, but it's about not consuming all the food you might want during the day.
Okay.
You're satisfying your hunger gently, with those later options, but you're not like totally stuffing yourself.
Okay. So it's more like setting the stage for the main event, the overeating phase at night. Tell me about that. What's involved?
So the overeating phase is basically one big meal that you have within a pretty short window, usually about 4 hours in the evening.
Okay.
And that's where you get the bulk of your calories for the day.
Okay. And just like the under-eating phase,
Yeah.
the quality of this meal really matters, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Huge emphasis on food quality and nutrient density.
Okay. So not just, anything and everything.
But at all.
And I thought this was interesting. There's actually like a recommended order for how you should eat this meal.
Yes, so the idea is you start with vegetables first,
Okay.
then you move on to protein sources, and then finally fats and carbohydrates.
Now, why that specific order? What's the thinking behind that?
So the idea is it's supposed to be best for your digestion,
Okay.
and it's supposed to help you absorb nutrients better.
Okay.
Starting with the vegetables gives you that fiber and those nutrients that can help process the heavier protein and carbs that come later.
Right. So it's all about working with your body's natural digestive process.
Exactly.
And again, we're not talking about like hitting the drive-through after a day of raw veggies.
No. It's still all about those nutrient-rich, minimally processed options to really maximize those benefits.
Okay, so let's actually break down the specific types of foods then that the Warrior Diet emphasizes. So protein seems to be a big one, as it often is in diets that are focused on, physical conditioning.
Right. Lots of meat, poultry, and fish. He specifically mentions fish for potentially higher testosterone levels and organic sources are emphasized.
Okay.
And there's actually a warning about whey protein concentrates because of potential dangers with processing.
Interesting. What about for our vegan and vegetarian listeners? What would be good options for them?
So for plant-based eaters, legumes are recommended. Grains like amaranth and buckwheat nuts and seeds, all good sources of protein.
Okay, so finding those whole unprocessed alternatives.
Yes.
Fats, another crucial component. What kind of fats are we looking at here?
So we talks about true unhydrogenated oils and fats like olive oil,
Okay.
fatty avocados.
Okay.
Essential fatty acids are important. And then there's a warning against polyunsaturated and artificially hydrogenated oils and fats, things like soybean oil and margarine.
Okay, so again, sticking with those more natural whole food sources.
Exactly.
Now, carbs, they often get a bad rap in a lot of diet approaches. Where do they fit in here?
So carbs are mostly consumed during the overeating phase.
Okay.
And the focus is on complex carbs, brown rice, barley oats, corn potatoes, yams.
Okay.
Minimize sugar and process simple carbs.
So the stuff that can mess with your insulin sensitivity, your body's ability to manage blood sugar. Okay. And vegetables, we've already talked about them, but they seem to be a cornerstone throughout both phases.
Absolutely crucial, especially during that undereating phase.
Okay. Now, I also noticed that the book touches on supplements. What's the take on that?
Yeah, minerals are considered essential. And then there's mention of beneficial vitamins, antioxidants, herbs, and even what he calls brain boosters for natural brain boosting.
Okay, so it's a pretty holistic approach, even thinking about the micronutrients there.
Yeah.
Now, beyond the specific foods, there's also this big emphasis on instinct and really tuning into your body's signals. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really interesting. He really encourages you to pay attention to subtle tastes and to relearn how to recognize your body's cues for hunger and fullness.
Okay.
So moving away from rigid meal schedules and more towards an intuitive approach.
So for those of us who, might find themselves battling cravings for, fast food, less healthy options, what's the advice there?
So he suggests that by following this cyclical pattern and really focusing on whole nutrient-dense foods during that overeating phase, those cravings will naturally diminish over time.
Okay, so your body kind of adjusts.
Yeah.
And there's also these golden rules of overeating, which sounds a little paradoxical.
Right. So the golden rules basically say, instinctively eat the right amount of food during your overeating window.
Yeah.
And maybe even more importantly, know when to stop.
Okay, so satisfying your hunger without going overboard.
Yeah.
Now let's get into some of the benefits that are proposed with this way of eating. One that I found intriguing was this idea of triggering the predator instinct. What does that mean?
So if we think about human evolution, that cyclical pattern of undereating and overeating kind of mimics the way our hunter-gatherer ancestors would have eaten.
Okay.
Undereating during the hunt and then having a big feast afterwards.
So tapping into those, deep biological responses.
Yeah.
And if from a more, metabolic standpoint, what are some of the advantages?
So the diet suggests that, because of that overeating phase coupled with the undereating phase, you get this accelerated anabolism. So that's the process of tissue repair and muscle building.
Okay.
It's also supposed to boost metabolism and enhance recovery from physical activity.
Okay. Hormonal balance is another area that's often discussed in relation to diet. What's the potential impact there?
So it hints at a positive impact on hormonal balance.
Yeah.
But doesn't get into a lot of specifics.
Okay.
But the idea is that, that cyclical nature of eating and the focus on whole foods is supposed to contribute to a more favorable hormonal environment.
And that undereating phase is also linked to, cellular repair and longevity, which is something we hear a lot about with intermittent fasting.
Right.
So how does that potentially play a role here?
So the idea is those brief periods of food restriction trigger natural defense mechanisms within your body and promote cellular repair processes, which are often associated with increased longevity.
Okay, so speaking of intermittent fasting, how does the warrior diet fit in with those broader concepts?
Well, you can definitely think of it as a type of intermittent fasting.
Okay.
You have that longer daily window of undereating and then a shorter window of concentrated eating.
Okay, so it shares that principle of strategically timing your food intake.
Yeah.
Now, for someone who's, thinking about trying this out, it's not like a rigid one-size-fits-all plan.
No, not at all. There's definitely room for creativity and individuality within the core principles.
Yeah.
You can adapt the specific foods and the timing of that overeating window to fit your lifestyle and preferences.
Okay, now the name itself, the warrior diet, It really evokes, those ancient warriors. And the book does talk about how these principles connect with that historical context, especially Roman warriors. What can we learn from them that might be relevant today?
Yeah, so he draws parallels between, the discipline and the physical culture of ancient warriors and, modern fitness goals.
Okay.
Roman warriors, for example, they really emphasized leanness functionality. And those ancestral style meals, their focus was really on being physically capable and resilient.
And it wasn't just about the diet either, right? There was this broader emphasis on recovery and other lifestyle factors.
Right, exactly. So for warriors, recovery, proper diet, and nutrition were paramount. He talks about the importance of sleep, breathing exercises, sunlight exposure, and spending time in nature for overall well-being and recovery.
Okay, so principles that are still relevant today.
Yeah, definitely.
And the book also touches upon, the functional applications of this diet for achieving specific fitness goals. What are some of those?
So achieving a lean physique, promoting fat loss, enhancing physical performance.
Okay, so that's where that cyclical eating pattern and the focus on those nutrient-dense foods comes into play.
Yeah.
Now let's address some of the common questions and concerns that people might have. Energy levels during the day is a big one. How does the diet address that?
Yeah, so if you're experiencing low energy or you're having trouble sleeping at night, he says that might indicate an imbalance. Make sure you're getting enough nutrient-dense food during that overeating phase. You might need to adjust the timing of that phase. And then he also emphasizes adequate hydration.
Okay, and what about the best times to take breaks from the diet, if any?
So basically, listen to your body.
Okay.
There's not like a strict schedule for breaks.
Okay.
It's more of an intuitive approach based on how you feel.
Okay, now he also specifically addresses women and the warrior diet. Are there any considerations for them?
Yeah, so while the diet can be effective for women, he encourages those who are drawn to that upper body emphasis that you often see in warrior physiques to focus on building strength, lean muscle, and functional agility without necessarily trying to gain a lot of weight.
Okay, so adapting those principles to individual goals.
Exactly.
And for those who are interested in building a more, functional body, how does the warrior diet support that?
Well, the idea is that combined with the right training, it enhances your adaptability to controlled fasting, and it supports training that balances intensity and high velocity, which contributes to functional fitness.
Okay, and fat loss is a primary goal for a lot of people when they're, thinking about changing their diet. How does the warrior diet approach that?
So that controlled fasting during the undereating phase is supposed to be a key mechanism for fat burning and boosting metabolic efficiency.
Okay, so creating that daily energy deficit and then replenishing afterwards.
Yeah.
Now, he also mentions a warrior workout. Is that a specific exercise regimen?
It sounds like it's more about, triggering that warrior instinct through performance under pressure.
Okay.
He suggests that training on a somewhat empty stomach during the undereating phase can be beneficial, but obviously you need proper nutrition and recovery during that overeating phase to support muscle growth and repair.
Okay, so just to give people a more concrete idea, can we touch on some sample meal ideas for that overeating phase?
Yeah, so a sample dinner might be, a big salad dressed with olive oil and lemon, followed by some grilled fish or lean meat. Then you could have some cooked vegetables and a small portion of complex carbs like sweet potato. And again, it's all about the order and the focus on those whole unprocessed ingredients.
And what are some of the foods that, the warrior diet advises to avoid or minimize?
Definitely refined sugar. It's linked to all those negative metabolic effects.
Okay.
Processed foods should be minimized as well.
Okay.
Excessive snacking obviously goes against the cyclical nature of the diet. And then certain refined staple grains are mentioned as potentially impacting insulin sensitivity.
Okay, now the book also briefly mentions combining the warrior diet with other dietary approaches like Diamond Mind's Eat for Life and Fit for Life. What's the connection there?
So those diets are mentioned as being popular among people who are looking for a practical path to health.
Okay.
And it kind of suggests that there's a potential compatibility there with the emphasis on whole foods and mindful eating.
Okay, and Dimental is also highlighted.
Yeah, for its focus on cyclical system detoxification.
Okay, now there's this interesting concept brought up called the soldier's mindset. How does that relate to the warrior diet?
Yeah, it's about connecting that discipline of ancient Roman soldiers to a mindset of commitment to order, avoiding distractions,
Yeah.
mental resilience, and dedication to a cause. And in this case, the cause is your health and well-being.
Okay, and just to kind of delve a little deeper into that historical context, what did the diet of Roman warriors actually look like?
So their diet was often based on simple whole foods that they would often forage.
Okay.
Evening meals were usually the biggest, and they included a variety of tastes and textures, things like grains, lentils, meat, fish, cheese, preserved foods.
Ah.
Army foraging practices and relying on local supplies were common. And then there was this thing called the car, which was a cavalry ration that was an important part of their military sustenance.
Interesting. So while the warrior diet draws inspiration from these ancient traditions, it's been adapted for the modern world,
Oh, definitely.
which makes it a lot more accessible for people.
Yeah, and he really emphasizes that idea that you are what you get, from your food.
Okay, lastly, let's touch on the immune system connection. How does the warrior diet potentially impact immunity?
Well, the idea is that immunity is naturally boosted during periods of fasting and detoxification, which happens during that under-eating phase.
Okay.
Your body recycles cells more efficiently during this time, and those processes can activate immune responses.
Okay, now for someone who's looking to actually implement the warrior diet, what are some practical tips to get started?
So start gradually. Listen to your body's signals. Prioritize hydration, at least 8 to 10 glasses of water daily, potentially more if you're working out. Be mindful of food quality and be consistent.
Okay, and there's also a psychological aspect to consider, right? He mentions that forcing yourself onto like a strict daily eating schedule can actually backfire.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the structure of the warrior diet, with that period of undereating, can actually lead to a greater sense of actual thirst and a deeper appreciation for food during that overeating phase,
Okay.
which can actually help with adherence.
Right, so it's not just about willpower, it's about working with your body's natural responses.
Exactly, and that discipline is kind of linked to, that Roman-like mental toughness.
And for those who are physically active, what are some training considerations with this diet?
So he notes that heavy lifting requires proper recovery, which is supported by that nutrient intake during the overeating phase.
Okay.
Lifting light weights mostly just burns calories, and training to failure really needs adequate nutrition and recovery. And he also challenges that myth that you need to be constantly fueling for muscle gain.
Interesting. Now the book ends with this kind of call to action, this do it now approach, presenting the warrior diet as this path to, taking charge of your health and becoming a human dynamo.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He really frames it as a way to potentially become a human dynamo by embracing these cyclical eating principles and the associated lifestyle factors.
So to kind of wrap up our deep dive into Ori Hofmekler's The Warrior Diet, the core principles revolve around cyclical eating, an under-eating day phase focused on light whole foods, and then an overeating night phase with that single nutrient-dense meal, and all while really listening to your body's natural cues.
Yeah.
And we talked about the potential benefits, fat loss, increased energy levels, metabolic improvements, that connection to our ancestral eating patterns.
Right.
Now, it's important to remember this approach may not be for everyone, and we always encourage you, the listener, to explore further, consider your individual needs, and consult with healthcare professionals before making any major changes to your diet or lifestyle.
And I think this raises an interesting question.
Yeah.
Could realigning our eating patterns with more of these, cyclical warrior-like principles be a key to unlocking greater health and vitality in our modern world?
Yeah, it definitely challenges our conventional relationship with food and the timing of our meals.
It does. It really makes you think.
Yeah, it does. So something for you to ponder as you continue on your own health journey.
Definitely.
All right, well, that wraps up another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you next time.
See ya.